This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West. For That Team Out West, I'm Ted LaRue. Now, we've been breaking down what the roster looks like, what offense has kind of looked like, what defense has looked like. We've been really focusing on the 2025 version of the Oregon Ducks. Now it's maybe time to do a deep dive into the future, 26, 27, 28, and that means a deep dive into Oregon Ducks recruiting. We are pleased to be joined now by Max Torres of ScoopDuck of the On3 and Rivals Network. And, Max, it has been a crazy recruiting cycle since January. You could obviously go back to the early signing period in December as well. You look at decommitments. You look at some big swings and misses in the spring. And then the summer of Dan kind of kicking into gear as well after official visits. What have been kind of some of your macro takeaways from this cycle as a whole? I know there's a lot. There's been a lot going on.
Calling it a crazy recruiting cycle definitely feels like an accurate way to describe it, Ted. But for me, when I just look big picture at things for Oregon, they're kind of staying true to themselves, maybe even doubling down a little bit on the recruiting trail. We know we heard Dan Lanning say that was the theme for this year's team. But in a crazy cycle, they're still doing a lot of what they've kind of always done, right? And I think that starts with recruiting nationally. That's a huge theme that you see for this class, going coast to coast all the way out to New York for Messiah Hampton. And then you're also pushing into the state of Florida, which is an exciting development with 2 verbal commitments there with Devin Jackson and Xavier Larise. And then you're also kind of going to some of your bread and butter states, your pipeline states, your Californias, your Texases, for guys like Tredarian Ball, Jalen Lott. And, I don't need to go through all of them. So I think that stands out to me for sure. And then they're also hitting on premium positions. They have an awesome offensive tackle. They have a really strong DB haul. And they also have one of the most exciting tight ends in the country. So with all this craziness going on with NIL, with transfer portal, I think that the Ducks have really just kind of stayed calm and stayed true to themselves and kept chopping wood, as Justin and I like to say over on ScoopDuck.
Absolutely. Now, what was in, and that's been like when we look back to the spring, there was a lot of, maybe in some parts of the fan base, maybe a little bit of panic, but you kind of staying true to the process. What was the highest level of concern that you had throughout the spring? Or did you kind of think like, oh, this is kind of the way things have gone? Or where were you kind of sitting when there was like these decommitments and these flips and kind of everything that was going on at that point?
Yeah, I don't think I would say that I ever got like worried outright at one point, because stuff's gonna happen. But at the end of the day, it sounds cliche, but Oregon's Oregon, and I've always believed that they're gonna get theirs and that they're gonna be just fine when the dust settles. But that being said, there were some moments where I was like, "Oh dang, oh wow, like what's going on there?" And I think for me, it really comes to like the flips. That is something that hasn't happened a whole lot for Oregon. The Cody Green one was huge until I dug a little bit deeper, and then I, talked about and realized they had some big relationships there over at Washington that helped them pull him back to his home state. Of course, he's playing at Mater Dei down in my neck of the woods here in SoCal. And then you also have some of the top targets that you just traditionally don't see Oregon missing on to relatively smaller programs. And I think Tommy Toffee, who's now in the class, Chloe Kelly, who's now in the class, them committing to Cal were some of those moments where I was just like, what? Like it was 2 different scenarios, because the Ducks have been recruiting Toffee for what feels like forever. And then they kind of got in the mix a little late with Chloe Kelly in May, I want to say it was. So I think when you see some of those guys, Ryder Lyons going to BYU, that wasn't necessarily a surprise, I would say. But there have been some crazy recruitments that have unfolded in different ways, but here we are. Oregon still has a top 10 class, and they're trending to be just fine.
Yeah, in the spring, it was kind of set up where they were targeting Jackson Cantwell. You talked about Cody Green was certainly in the mix before he flipped over to Washington, and it's kind of where I want to pivot my next point. One of my big takeaways is this offensive line class looks pretty darn good, and these are some big old boys coming up from the high school ranks and kind of where they're at right now. Of course, Emmanuel Ahinacho, you got Tammy Tofi, and then Kaloy Kelly, as you mentioned as well. Those last two were flips from the Golden Bears, as you mentioned. What makes each one of these guys special, and what kind of stands out to you, and what Elely Terry has been able to do with this offensive line class in 26?
Yeah, Elely Terry's doing a great job, as is the law firm in this 2026 class. That's not to say there haven't been some share of challenges, but as the cycle kind of unfolded, it started to feel like it was Emmanuel or bust, but they ended up getting him in the fold, especially after Cantwell headed out to Miami. But these are three really good players. I'll start with Emmanuel off the top. I mean, he's just a massive human being, and I think that you don't really need to overcomplicate things too much when you're analyzing him. Guys his size don't typically move like he does, and that's kind of where it starts, I think, when you look at all the offers that he garnered in his recruitment and why he's such a big piece for Oregon. I think that you just have to have that cornerstone tackle to protect your quarterback, and the Ducks certainly have that with him in the fold here. And then Tommy Tofi, another just huge dude. I think he's 6'5", 6'6", and maybe around that neighborhood of 330 pounds. He's listed as an interior offensive lineman, but it seems like the plan is for him to play tackle at Oregon, which I think just lends itself to his versatility. He's another offensive lineman that we've kind of seen some videos on social media circulating of him throwing down some dunks over there at Archbishop Reardon in San Francisco. So just a tremendous athlete in his own right. But I think Kaloy Kelly might be the guy that isn't getting enough love in this haul, Ted, because I spoke to a source about him before he had committed, after he had taken his official visit, and I had heard that hey, he's not necessarily going to pass the eye test. He's not this big, massive, polished guy that's going to get a lot of people excited. He's not going to pass the size, weight, speed kind of combo that you look for, but this is a damn good football player. I think he's widely viewed as the best interior offensive lineman, maybe the best lineman in the state of Hawaii. But you have to also look at Malachi Lee, of course, the Michigan commit. He's out there in Hawaii, and he's a tremendous player as well. So I think Kaloy Kelly is going to be that center of the future for Elely Terry, and his versatility is going to be big. Maybe will take a little bit to kind of cook in the oven and develop, but I think he's going to be a good player for the Ducks.
Man, I look at Tommy Tofi, and it's just, man, that kid can move. Like, he can just flat out move on his high school tape, and it's certainly great to see. But, yeah, certainly seems like maybe at Oregon he's going to shift over to tackle. Another main takeaway that I had, this is a class with just a ton of playmakers that can do a lot of different things, like Jalen Lott. I mean, Tredarian Ball out of Texas. You see him line up in the backfield. You see him line up out wide. You see him return kicks. Very versatile weapon. Messiah Hampton. I mean, Kendra Harrison is just an absolute freak of nature with his size and his athleticism at tight end. Which one of these skill sets, I know it's going to be tough to pick some, but which one of these skill sets stands out to you that maybe excites you the most out of these playmakers?
It might be the easy pick, but I'm going to go with Kendra Harrison.
Right. Yep.
I'm a guy who played some tight end in high school. I was not anything special. That is part of the reason I ended up becoming a journalist, and kind of just wanted to be around it and still be able to talk about it and those kind of things. But when you look at Kendra Harrison, it's pretty hard not to be excited about what he brings to the table, whether it's on the football field or on the hardwood as a national basketball recruit as well. There's been so much talk, Ted. I was over in Eugene for Oregon Football Media Day recently. The Kenyon Sadiq hype just continues to grow. So he's kind of viewed or billed as that freak athlete on Oregon's roster now. Well, if he has the season that a lot of us are expecting him to have and heads off to the NFL, the Ducks will be losing one freak show and then gaining another when Kendra Harrison arrives in Eugene. So you just don't see that many just elite top tier tight ends. It's really hard to, I think, recruit those guys because there are so few of them that are absolutely elite. But Drew Maringer and the rest of this Oregon staff were able to get that one done. And I think that he's certainly someone that could see the field early.
Yeah, that's like if you kind of take a look at the recent track record of Oregon tight ends, like Terrence Ferguson is like top 3 to top 5 all time in a lot of Oregon history tight end statistical measures, career, single season, that kind of thing. And then you've got Sadiq, and then you're going to make your way to Kendra Harrison. That is that could be quite a run at the tight end position, no doubt about that. Now I want to move to the defense. I mean, Oregon's secondary recruiting over the last 2 years has been a little bit of a Death Star. Like they just kind of get who they want kind of at this point. Chris Hampton and company have been doing a phenomenal job. It looks like 26 is going to be another really good class for the Ducks. Why do you think they have been able to have so much success in the secondary the last couple of years?
It's a great question, Ted. I think it starts to a degree with what we've seen Oregon do on the field. I think that Oregon hasn't really been known, I guess, as a DB factory. I don't think that they're in that DBU conversation, but every couple of years, you're seeing someone really good from the Ducks make their way to the NFL, right? You talk about guys like Javon Holland, Diamador Lenore. Most recently, Christian Gonzalez is a guy who's just absolutely exploded onto the scene right when he got there. So I think that you're seeing more recruits are seeing what the Ducks are doing at the position, and then just the defense that Lanning puts together for them to join and be a part of. I think that Oregon's success at the defensive back position from a recruiting standpoint is directly tied to what they've been able to do with defensive line recruiting, because a defensive back's best friend is an awesome pass rush. So I think that these guys that are coming to play for the Ducks see the monsters that Lanning and Tuioti and Tosh are bringing in along the point of the attack, and that's really helping them sell them on just the situation overall that they're going to be joining in Eugene. So Chris Hampton's been doing a tremendous job. He's, I think, a little bit more experienced, I should say. Right. We know that he was obviously on that Tulane team that beat USC, and I want to say it was the Fiesta Bowl a couple years back. Hopefully I'm getting that one right. But he's done a tremendous job. And then Rashad Wadood is another up-and-comer on this staff. West Coast ties, from SoCal guy, was a coach at Long Beach Poly just up the road from me. And he is someone that is tremendously valuable to this staff. I know USC made a huge run at him this offseason. So that's kind of just a little bit of the equation that I think I see there with DB recruiting.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. Like you said, I know they got Dylan Thieneman, of course, transferring in on this year's team, but maybe the last time that they had like that great type of player, you got to go back to Christian Gonzalez and, like you said before that, Javon Holland. So now I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for these guys to kind of come in, make an impact, and really fill out these depth charts as well. So that should be exciting. I can't wait to see what Jet Washington can do when he get here, man. You go look at him and his height. I mean, you look at the current team, you look at a guy like Kingston Lopa, who's there, like 6'4", 6'5". Sione Lalea is another guy. So height, length, speed, as Chris Hampton talked about it during the spring, and it is certainly trending that way with the type of talent that they're bringing in. Quarterback, like when we talk about the roller coaster at the beginning, quarterback has been an absolute roller coaster since the 2025 signing day back in December. Of course, it started out with the very short-term signee of Jaron Sagapulatelli and how that whole saga certainly went down. You had Jonas Williams flipped to USC. You had Jared Curtis recommitting to Georgia. You had Ryder Lyons. After the Curtis recommitment, it seemed like Ryder was on pace to go to Oregon, but then he ends up at BYU. We keep on spinning around here, and the Ducks eventually get a commitment from Bryson Beaver, who is a really high riser, especially around that Elite 11 time, that performance that he had there. All things considered, all of that information, you kind of pack it in. Do you believe Oregon came out in a great spot with the commitment of Beaver, kind of compared to some of these other guys that they missed out on?
I do think so, and I know a lot of Oregon fans kind of have mixed emotions when it comes to quarterback recruiting, because for a while it looked like Jared Curtis named Oregon his leader after backing off that Georgia commitment. So they thought they were in the driver's seat there and things were looking good, but then came down to it, he recommitted to Georgia, and that's something we kind of have to reevaluate here, because that hasn't really been common in recruiting, but he decided to do that, stay close to home. And then Ryder Lyons looked like that was Will Stein's guy for this cycle, and then he ended up picking BYU over the Ducks. But all things considered, I do think that Oregon came out in a great spot, because just the way that the situation has kind of shaken out at that quarterback position for Oregon, like they're not in and won't really be in a position where they need someone who's super green, super young to come in and play meaningful snaps right away. I mean, Dante Moore is the most inexperienced quarterback that the Ducks will look like they're going to trot out in a while now, since they're going kind of from some transfer portal guys to some more homegrown, if you will. I don't know if you would want to put Dante Moore in that category, but he feels like he's homegrown because he was committed to Kenny Dillingham and the Ducks at one point. But the reality of it is this, Ted, I don't think that Oregon wants to have to rely on the transfer portal, but that it's always going to be there. And they're going to be able to get a fairly quality guy out of the transfer portal whenever they want at that position. It's not like it's hard to recruit guys to come play quarterback for Oregon. That's not to diminish the job that the staff has done, but it's just kind of one of those things, like who would pass up that kind of an opportunity. And I think that Will Stein has a great one with Bryson Beaver. He was the hottest quarterback recruit in the country at the time that he committed, balled out at the Elite 11. And I think that that's a guy who has a lot of talent, but he's still like really malleable, and they still feel like there's a lot that they can get out of him, is kind of what my take on it is.
And that's kind of what I'm excited about. I think in the future, like you said, you've had these guys. Bo Nix certainly did a lot of developing from his days at Auburn to when he left Oregon. But, you kind of knew what you had going in with Dylan Gabriel. I'm really excited to see what the development is going to be for someone like a Dante Moore, or maybe some of these other guys like a Bryson Beaver coming in, or an Achilles Smith Jr. and all of those guys. See just how high Will Stein can get these guys in terms of their ceiling going forward. Now, we got the season, of course, coming up here very shortly, and that spring and summer commitment season after official visits is kind of winding down a little bit here. Everybody's kind of looking forward to flip season when it comes to Oregon Ducks recruiting, as we are going to get a little bit closer and closer and closer to December here in the coming months. What are some names that are on your radar right now that you think Oregon could pursue for some flips as we inch closer to December?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it comes at a good time because I recently put out a couple of stories kind of around that topic about Oregon's flip targets here in the 2026 class. I think one big name that has always kind of come to mind for me is Talanoa Elely, who's committed to USC. Sure. And I know that they kind of feel like they're just this recruiting giant right now, and I'm not here to say that they aren't, but Oregon and Talanoa Elely always felt like a really good match. I know there was a little bit of, a discrepancy as far as what position he was going to be playing in college. I think that kind of helped sway USC. Looks like he wanted to play linebacker for them, but Oregon kind of views him as an edge in the long term. But they still need some linebackers, so I think that that's definitely a position that you have to keep an eye on, even though he would be an edge at Oregon. But a guy like a Kenneth Goodwin who's committed to SMU, or a Bo Jandreau who's committed to Oklahoma. Heck, Nick Abrams just chose Georgia, but I don't expect Oregon to go away without a fight there. And then I think on the offensive side of the ball, just to give a little bit of love to that side of the ball, maybe another offensive lineman could be someone that we see here, like an offensive tackle. I don't think that Cody Green's super likely, but maybe that's a possibility. You also have Dominic Harris out of the Las Vegas area in that Washington class. He had wanted to take a visit to Oregon before he committed, but that trip didn't ultimately come together. And then maybe a massive pipe dream, but I think you should keep an eye on Caden Dixon-Wyatt. That was one that I really thought Oregon had a shot with. But it's hard to bet against the Buckeyes for top wide receivers. So we'll keep an eye on those guys here, Ted.
Where do you kind of sit? I know one name that's kind of been thrown out there very popularly is Zion Elely. Oregon was once his leader before he ended up committing to Maryland and shutting down his recruitment. Where do you kind of put that in the grand scheme of things in terms of a flip? Do you see that as maybe something that the staff is going to really continue to push hard for once we get to December, or is that kind of maybe a little bit of a pipe dream, I guess, as we sit right now?
Yeah, I think you never say never with this recruiting stuff. I mean, we've seen so many examples, Ted, where you just check your feed and you're like, what? Right. So you never know, but I would kind of slate it in the pipe dream category for now. I had talked to a pretty good source that, had kind of communicated to me that Oregon doesn't seem like they're entertaining that one too much moving forward here. Especially with Prince Tavazon now reclassifying, I don't think that the edge position is maybe as pressing of a need. Maybe Oregon can kind of allocate their resources elsewhere. With someone like Tank Jones that they're obviously recruiting. That's been a big guy for them. So I think it's a little bit of a pipe dream, but who knows? I mean, maybe Loxley is on the hot seat and gets fired, and then you're looking at a new position. He's looking for a new home. So I'm not expecting it. Everything I've heard kind of leads me to believe that Oregon's moved on, but we'll see.
I think that is the one opening, if indeed Maryland does make a coaching change towards the end of the year, and then maybe in the last couple of weeks it could get real interesting at that point. It's been wild through this recruiting cycle, Max. I thank you for joining me today to kind of recap it all. There's some fans have kind of maybe forgot about what happened here, but you're dialed in, and thank you for coming on and kind of recapping it all. And we're certainly excited for the season, and thanks for joining me today.
No doubt. Thanks for having me, Ted.